Hello. We think about everything we need, and so often our needs turn out to be our wants. God is the only one who can really meet our needs. And think about it. If you had one need, one request right now, what would it be? Not for someone else, not for the nation, not for the world, but for you. There's an old hymn that says, "My Jesus knows just what I need." Yes, he knows just what I need. He satisfies and every need supplies. Yes, he knows just what I need. And he knows what you need too. And think about it as being like a gift that he would wrap up and put together just for you with your name tag on it. Today we're going to look at three different men and realize that God knows what we need even when we don't know. Oh, I know what my wants are. I know what I'd like to have happen, but he knows my needs. And the problem is my wants and my needs, just like the three men we're going to talk about, they're not usually the same thing. You see, time hasn't changed much. As far back as Bible times, people focused on what they can see and the circumstances around them rather than on what their real needs are. That's just the way it happened with Joseph. Joseph's story starts in Genesis chapter 37. And I tell you, when I start reading Genesis and I get to chapter 37, I might as well just plan to finish reading all the way to the end of Genesis because it is a great story about one man and the struggles that he faced. And to really get the full impact of it, you've got to read all those chapters. It starts out with Joseph when he was only 17, and he was out in the fields with his stepbrothers, the sons of one of his wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. And it says in verse 5 of 37, "Now Jacob loved Joseph more than all of his children because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors." The favorite son of 12 boys. That was a pretty good life for a teenager. Things were going so well for him, he had it made. Until his brothers got together. Joseph started having dreams. He started telling his brothers not only what God had told them, but what their faults were and how good he was going to be and how powerful he was going to be and how someday they were going to bow down to him. Typical sibling rivalry. One day they caught Joseph out in the fields. He was not anticipating any problems. He thought everything was fine. He was on another mission for Daddy until the brothers captured him and put him in a pit and planned to leave him there till death. And they would have, except verse 28 tells us the Midianite traders passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Now, Joseph's life from then on has ups and downs. He's sold to Potiphar as a slave, learns the language, gets promoted, is over the entire household until the wife lies about him. He ends up back in prison. While he's in prison, can't you just imagine what's going through his mind? His first complaints. "I didn't do anything to deserve this." And where is God? God was with me in the good times and he said he'd never leave me. Now, where is he? Things didn't get any better. And so when that happens in our life, we follow up with, "God, I need life to be like it used to be before all of this. And that's our problem. When we're going through problems and we look back on our past, we only remember the good times. We forget that our past had problems as well. And so what we think is, most of all, I just need to be out of this dungeon. I need to be out of this circumstance, out of this situation. And we're focused on the circumstance. And when that doesn't change, we realize God's not moving. We say, Lord, let me find someone else who can help then, because you're certainly not doing anything. And now we're at chapter 40. And Pharaoh was angry with his chief butler and his chief baker, and he threw them in prison where Joseph was. And they each had a dream one night, and they were troubled. They knew it had a meaning, but they couldn't figure it out. Joseph comes to them and says, isn't God the one who interprets dreams? Don't all dreams belong to him? Tell me what your dream means. And so the butler told him. And Joseph interpreted the dream. And he said, the dream you had 3 branches in it. And those 3 branches represents 3 days. And within 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you. But he doesn't stop there. He goes on, and in verse 14 and 15, Joseph says, but remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed, I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing here that they should put me into the dungeon. 3 days pass, and sure enough, the butler gets out. Oh, it's Pharaoh's birthday. He is in a good mood. Can't you just see Joseph? Finally, there is someone here to prove my innocence and get me out. Thank you to God. Oh, thank you for sending me some help. Well, it didn't happen the way Joseph thought it would. The butler got out, but Joseph stayed. Because God doesn't rush. And it says in 41, the next chapter, then it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh himself had a dream. 2 years he had to wait. And at the end of 2 years, Joseph was brought before Pharaoh, and he was released. God could have allowed the butler to have assisted Joseph 2 years earlier. God could have allowed Joseph to receive what he wanted and had his freedom 2 years sooner, instead of staying in that prison for an additional 2 years. But what would have happened if God had given Joseph what he wanted? He would have left the dungeon, he would have left Egypt, and he would have gone straight back to Daddy. And he would have been with Daddy and all of his brothers when the famine struck. He would have starved along with all of his family. But you see, he had no idea of what his real need was or why he had to go through that. But God knew what Joseph needed. And God knows what we need. He knows exactly what you need. God is able to do anything he wants, and he can meet your needs in any way that he chooses. And he meets the needs of different people in different ways. Joseph and John the Baptist, 2 great examples. They had much in common. You might think, how could they have anything in common? Old Testament, New Testament? No. They were both thrown in prison by people who were jealous of them. They followed God, and they were innocent, but because others hated them, they suffered. The way God met their need was as individual as they were. He knew what John the Baptist needed. And John in Matthew chapter 11, we get a glimpse of this story. John grew up with one mission in life. That was to proclaim the coming Messiah. He was doing God's will. But doing God's will makes God happy, but not necessarily everyone else. And everyone wanted to hear about their sin while John preached about the Messiah. And so when Herod put John in prison and he was facing certain death, it caused him to rethink the one he had followed. I mean, he had already given so much of his life. He wanted to know, was he making the right decision? Was this Jesus the Messiah? And in Matthew 11, verses 2 and 3, when John had heard in prison about the works of Christ, he sent two of his disciples and said to him, "Are you the coming one, or do we look for another?" What John wanted was reassurance. Thinking, have I been mistaken? I've given my life to preaching one message about this one man. And if Jesus were the one that he had been preaching about, shouldn't there be some help for him now? And the other thing, he wanted a confirmation. Just give me a word. Are you the one? Just answer my question. And so Jesus does answer. Verses 11, 4 through 6. Jesus answered, "Go and tell John the things which you hear and see. The blind see, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who is not offended because of me." Wait a minute. He says, "Are you the one?" That was John's question. But his question did not get a yes or no answer. Jesus knew what John wanted. But more importantly, he also knew what John needed. John, look at the facts. Look at what's happening. You see, in the end, John did not need another word. He really didn't need confirmation. Or for Jesus to come and visit him. He was not looking just for another touch from God. Some people, they follow people around, give me another word, give me another word, give me another promise. Let me feel something. And he did not even need angels to come and get him out of that prison. He did not need one more miracle. You see, what John wanted were those things. But what he needed was to know that the one that he was about to die for really was the Messiah. He needed proof and not comfort. Jesus knew that proof would last. It would see him through to the end. He knew that when the prison guards came for John and they were ready to behead him, he would have proof of who the Messiah was. He would have proof that the one that he had been preaching about really was the Messiah and that he really had come. But if all he had did was make him feel good, give him comfort, give him another word, another confirmation, well, that would have to be reinforced over and over every time that he was going through something. and it would never really be enough. Many times we want the feel good, and Jesus says, no, this is what you need. He knows what we need. When others cause problems, it's easy for us, like John, like Joseph, to focus on the circumstances and want relief from that situation. You know, sometimes we go through some circumstances and some situations that cannot be blamed on other people. Let's consider the man that was born lame. Jesus knew what the lame man needed. In Acts chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, it tells us, well, it gives us the introduction to this story. And it says, Peter and John went up to the temple at the hour of prayer, and a certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple called Beautiful, to ask alms for those who entered the temple. Now think of this. We don't know exactly how old he was, but all of his life he had been unable to walk. And it said that he was carried daily. You know, think about that. This was in the days before wheelchairs. He had to be picked up. It said they carried him. If he were a child, you could probably scoop one child up in your arm. But a man, a grown man, it would take at least two to carry, either on their arms or on some type of makeshift bed or pallet that they had made. And they carried him every day. Now, he went there for the purpose of asking for alms. Now, we don't know if the ones that carried him were his friends that did that because they loved him. Maybe they were relatives, or maybe by now his friendships have gotten a little thin and his relatives have gotten a little few. And there may be people who are carrying him that he's even had to pay. And from the alms, they get a percentage. So every day they go there. And so this man is not lame by choice. He's not lame because of others. But with the help of others, he is doing the very best he can. And so what he wants is enough to survive. What he wants, because they carry him daily, is enough sympathy and compassion from those who pass by to make it through another day. And so verses 3 and 4 tells us what happens while he's there on this particular day. And who, the layman, seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, asked for alms. And fixing his eyes on him with John, Peter said, "Look at us." So he, the lame man, gave them his attention, expecting to receive something from them. Eye contact. That's what he's made. Hope starts to rise. You know what it's like. You've been in that situation often enough. You're driving down the street and you're coming up to an intersection and you see the person standing there holding a sign. And all of a sudden you think, do I look at him? Or no, I've got to watch a stop sign. Oh, I need to find something, on the player. I need to start a conversation with the passenger, or whatever. If you're not going to help, you do everything you can to avoid eye contact. Because if you make the eye contact, you then have to make a decision. First of all, you make an evaluation. Is this person legitimate? If you don't feel the person's legitimate, turn your eyes. There's no hope. But then, if in looking you see and you believe there's a legitimacy, then you've got another choice. Do I give something? Am I enabling? Can I give something? What do I have with me? And so the man knew that eye contact had been made and hope started to arise. But then hope went down because Peter said, silver and gold have I none. The man probably thought, oh, you're as broke as I am. But he had Peter's attention, and he knew Peter was on the way to the temple. And did he think, what good are you? Did he think, oh no, here comes another sermon? He'd probably heard a lot of them in his days. And thinking, you're another do-gooder, just going to pray for me and say, be healed and go on. Or maybe you're one that's going to cast me down and say, you could do better than this, whatever. And Peter says, I can't give you any money. And so his hope's down. But Peter doesn't stop there. Peter does what any of us could do. In chapter 3, verses 6, the last part of it, through 8, it says, but what I do have, I give to you. When he says that, he probably looks and says, well, you don't have any water bottles, you don't have any food, you don't have any money, what can you give me? Peter said, in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. And he took him by the right hand and lifted him up. And immediately his feet and ankles and bones received strength. So he, leaping up, stood and walked and entered the temple with them, walking and leaping and praising God. Peter took that step. While the man was still sitting, he picked him up by the hand. And as he lifted him, his ankles received the strength. His feet received the strength. His ankle bones. He gave him what he could. God knows what he needed, and he knows what you needed. Sometimes we're like that lame man. Our needs are so great, we only ask for something small. He had been lame all his life. He did not believe any way was possible for him to be healed. And so what did he do? He says, give me a little bit of money. Help me make it through the day. Help me find enough to get some food. He did not believe he could ask for something that great. He wanted enough to survive the day. But Jesus gave him what he needed and what he wanted, but never thought he could ask for. He gave him the strength so that he could get up, leave that place of begging, go out and provide for himself on a daily basis from then on. He no longer was a beggar. He was no longer defined as the lame man who sat by the temple. But now he could be in a position that he could provide for himself as much as he would need. God knows what we need, and he always, always gives us more. Ephesians 3:20 and 21 says, now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. To him be glory in the church by Christ Jesus to all generations forever and ever. It says more than we are able to ask or think. The lame man was asking for alms, he did not think that he could be healed. What he got was more than he asked for. He received more than just enough to get through that day as far as money was concerned. He now had the ability that he could go out and be secure. And more than he could think. He never thought he could be healed. God knows what we need when we don't even know what we need. His gifts to us are as unique as we are. Oh, there are people that still today that are like Joseph, John the Baptist, the lame man, or hundreds of others in history. Today they're walking around with needs. Today we have needs. But no matter what we face, he knows how to individually meet our needs. So, knowing that he does it with the very best gift possible, remember at the beginning I asked you, what do you want? What's your need? And I ask you to think not what your family needs or the nation or your friends or anyone else, but what do you personally need? And when you think about that, the greatest gift that Jesus has for you, the greatest gift he could ever give you, is the gift that will meet your need right now. That's the one that he has waiting for you. He knows the situation that you're in. Some of you may be like Joseph. You've waited a long time and it hasn't happened. Just know that it's going to come in his timing. Some of you may be like John the Baptist and say, I can't understand how I'm in this situation. But most of all, where's God? I ask him to show himself to me. And I see that he's healing others. The blind can see and all of that, but nothing's happened to me right now. He's given you that as proof that what he has done for others, he'll do for you, because he is no respecter of person. Or maybe you're like the lame man. Your need is so great, so big, it's impossible to have it met. Know that he can do exceedingly, abundantly more than you can ask or think. He has the right gift for your need at this particular moment. And may not be ready for you to open yet, but it's already prepackaged, has your name on it. And he has designed it with you in mind, because he will meet your greatest need with his greatest gift.